Hello, and welcome to Smith Family Gaming. I'm your host Zane, and today what we're going to do is we're going to paint some Xenos from Zombicide Invader. What I normally do when I paint stuff from a board game is I like to use the artwork as my inspiration. So we're going to be using those colors, color scheme, I guess. One thing that I did do is I did buy the Army Painter paint line for Zombicide Invader, so I'm going to also try to use just those paints to get the effect that I want. I may have to use some other colors because they don't have a pure red color, which if you can't get a pure red, you can't really get some colors on there. And they're aliens, so they need to have maybe a little bit of blood on them or something, you know. So we got to have a little bit of a dark red, but most of the other colors are present, and I can do all sorts of other things with that. So let's move it to the table, and let's take a look at what we got going on. Okay, so here we are. I've got some artwork here. We're going to try to do this Flinger here. I've got him. I already primed him in kind of a zenithal-y look. So I'm going to take a look at the picture here, and we've got, it looks like some purple on his little spine-like thing running down the length of his body. Definitely some pink and reddish color. I think they've got a brown color for these kind of almost claw-like carapace here. And then obviously a green and white for the little, I don't know, head, skull thing here. But to me, down here, it looks like we've got some red on his little appendages here. And, you know, if you look over here, like I said, there's definitely some red in this. I guess that's a seeker worker. Okay, so there's definitely some red. And like I said, in the whole set, it doesn't actually come with any red. So what it comes with is a Xeno carapace, an armor gray, a pale skin, a tentacle red, a soldier green, a rigid brown, an invader shader, which is just their, I believe it's their dark or black shade. And then we've got a combat gold, a gun black, and a abomination white, because you always need just a black and a white. So I'm going to cheat a little bit, obviously. We don't have a red, so that stinks. We need the red. I don't know why you would make one without having a pure red. There's no way to get this pink color because it is pink. Don't get wrong here. This is a pink color. It does not get... You cannot, with these colors, you cannot turn it a darker color red. I have tried, and it's too muddy. It's not a blood red or something on those lines there. So, well, what I'm going to use for that, and what I've been using to get the red that I desire here, is another Zombicide Army Painter paint, Abomination Gore. And so we're going to cheat, and that's the one we're going to use. The colors that I'm going to use for this is I'm going to try to mix up a tentacle red and a Xenos carapace to make a purple that I'll use to get the spine-like area here. And if it isn't dark enough, I'll fiddle with it, and we'll get it over there, and maybe use the Abomination Red. Abomination Red we're going to use for the red areas. Invader Shader we're going to use. I don't normally, on most things, I don't normally use washes anymore. I tend to just go ahead and just layer up and everything else, and go about my painting style a different way. But we're going to go ahead and use it on these, because when I'm kind of trying to do a whole batch of them, I do use that to help bring it out a little bit, and works out all right, I guess. I've got a I'm not going to use the Armor Gray. I don't need it. It's moot point right there. The Abomination White I may use in the black just to get some on the color wise. Don't need no combat gold, so we're not going to use that either. I'm going to use this rigid brown for the carapace areas, and I'm going to use the pale skin for the his head like area there, and then of course the soldier green for the green areas. So he's already all primed up. Yeah, looks all right. So we'll get right into it. I'll turn the camera off for a minute and get these paints that I'm going to use shook up, and we'll go from there. So we start off with this soldier green, and because it's the most area that has it in coverage, and I'm just going to thin it down, use my finger to test the opacity of it, and I'm going to cover all the green areas with green. Pretty simple there. I like to keep my paint a little thin, almost to a glaze like consistency, and have the zenithal prime kind of help give my shadows and my highlights a little bit easier. And I just keep going over all the green areas and go from there. Well, we're kind of just watching me paint here. We'll talk about kind of some of the stuff that I'm going to be having coming up pretty soon. I do want to make a video here pretty soon about painting some of the other things I got. Some of those scale 75 instant color stuff that I planned on. Bjorn, I think is his name. A bust that they had painted. I want to try to paint it like that. I also have some new stuff coming in from Kickstarter at some point. And I also have some weathering pencils that I'm trying out from AK Interactive. That should be coming this week. And I'll give an unboxing and kind of a tutorial trial thing on them. I'm going to have to goof around on them quite a bit to get that what I want, but we'll see. Right now we're doing a little bit of painting on this here with some of that tentacle red, and it's pretty thin down, and that's fine. I do several layers, same thing with the green and stuff like that. I'm not going to go overly do it on it because I'm going to be using that dark wash on it too later on, so the Invader shader. So right now we're just kind of getting this on here. We're wanting to make it a nice solid color though, definitely on this pink and everything else. Most of that is going to be dark like we want it to be. And then from there we're going to go and mix this Xenopus carapace with one of the reds. I tried to do it with the tentacle red and didn't get the purple I had desired, so I did it with the Abomination Gore and got that looking pretty well. And we just painted the spine very delicately. You want to try to be a little bit careful on that. I wouldn't be super careful on it, especially since this is, your first base coat. You're not really too worried about getting paint everywhere. You can go back over it before you put on the wash, or however you want to do it. I tend to have, since I got everything on the wet palette, if I make a mistake, I correct it here when I get a chance. Normally, if it's, all the green is probably what is going to get hit because it's the largest area and I'm painting smaller areas inside of it. And I'll just come back at the end and put the green on it. Here we use the Abomination Gore for its, tongue and or tentacles coming out of his mouth area. And we just put that on liberally and try to be kind of careful with it. And then we go with our rigid brown for our legs or claw-like appendages here. And we just put that on nice and generously also. One thing I'm going to be doing is I want to be putting a lot of these on kind of like a glaze so that they're light and everything else. I'm taking my time on trying to get these underneath of them, get them painted up so that they look really good, even underneath where nobody's going to look but me. And then we use this pale skin to do the head. Now we're on to the wash.
And we're going to just add that wash on with a crummy brush that's lost its tip. We're going to be careful though about getting it all over the place. I definitely don't want to get it on the face of it because I don't want that color to be changed a little bit. You want to try to keep the pooling off of it. I put it on a little thick so that I could get those nice lines on it, and you'll see there that I kind of got them already where I want them and everything else, trying to soak up areas where they're too much or whatever. And now we got made a darker green color with the black to use as my shading, and we're just doing basically the underneath of it where I would have any kind of my shadows. I did that also underneath the tail that's kind of sticking up. Underneath the bottom of that is darkened up with this darker shaded green that I made. And I'm just getting that. I'm trying to gradient it up towards the top where, you know, the shadow would be gone by then. And that's just a mixture, I think, of a little almost maybe a 1-to-1 on the black and the green, but it may have been a little bit more towards the green side probably, because black will turn things black really, really fast. So from there we go ahead and I start doing a gradient on my greens. First, when I do my first highlight here in just a minute, I do it with the regular green, and then I gradient it up to a white. And if you take a look in between me painting on my palette, you'll see that I have a gradient from the darkest green all the way up to my lightest green. And then I just painted over all my areas with this light green, and then went up and I drag it down into the areas that was darker, because this is all like a glaze, so it's going to go over the top of the other ones and try to get it a little bit better color transition a little bit. And then I did the tail, really highlighting in green. We'll find out here in a minute that that was probably a mistake, but we'll just go with it for now. All this is done pretty well. You can't really see it yet. I did it off camera, but later on I went ahead and I put a really, really light green and use it to kind of paint those veins in the back of it where the lightest colors are. Here's the part where my wife kind of informed me. I showed it to her and she's like, that's too green. It's kind of more of a brownish green. And so I was like, you're right. And I used a little bit of that rigid brown and the green, soldier green, and kind of mix it into a glaze and put it on the tail and just kind of glazed over all of my green. And I went basically over all of it except for the recesses, because I was already had highlighted it up to the highlight areas that I wanted. And so just glazing it over with this slightly brownish color didn't really change my highlights at all. My highlights still stayed the same color because, or, you know, highlighted, because I'm just adding a very faint color to it. That's kind of the point of a glaze and how a glaze is supposed to work. So that's kind of nice there. And I kind of tried to gradient it up. I didn't have a very good gradient on a shadow down below him, so I kind of got that fixed in this point in the video. And then shortly after that, I at some point, I don't know where at exactly, but I did add a little bit of pink to it's got a couple little spots on its head, and I added just a little bit of the pink on a very, very thinned out, even almost less than a glaze, almost a wash a little bit. I mean, it was very, very thin, and I just kind of sploshed it on over that area, because if you looked at the picture, there was kind of a pinkish red on his little dome thing there, and then I glazed over that to thin it down a little bit so it wasn't quite so pink, with a little bit of the white over the top of that, and it turned out pretty well. From here, I'm highlighting my the legs on this, and what I did at first is I first made just a rigid brown, went over it all, and then I went down for the rigid brown and I mixed a little bit of that Abomination gore with it, and I did about 3/4 of the way down. I painted that mixture, and then I graded it up going to closer to red, and each time going a little bit less. So like, let's say that I went 2 to 1 with rigid brown being 2. I did that 3/4, then half I did 1 to 1, and then at the very bottom quarter I did the abomination red. So I don't think that was exactly it, because I don't think I did the exact abomination red at the very bottom, but I did try to get that to be a little bit more red than brown for the most part, to try to get that looking well. This took me all about I don't know, 3 hours to paint, and we don't know, I mean, how long that exactly is. Before I started editing this video and stuff, it was 3.5 hours, but there's a lot of stuff that you edit out because you're not painting during all of it, mixing up paint, you're doing this and that. I don't think it even actually took me that long to paint. So it's just a little bit of a thing there. The whole point of this was trying to go rather quickly. One thing I did do when I went into highlighting, everything else so far has been highlighted up. After I got this feet done, what I did is I went ahead and I glazed a little bit of that abomination red into the maw. That's what I'm calling the little spitter mouth area there. And I glazed that abomination red and tried to get all the recesses and the darker areas into being super dark red. And while I was waiting for that to dry, I did some other red areas, abomination gore on his tongue, highlighted that up with a little bit of the tentacle red also mixture, so I could highlight it. But I didn't do a whole bunch because, like I said, on this, what I'm trying to do is trying to go rather quickly so it doesn't take me too long to paint these. I do tend to spend, since this is going to be my template, I do spend a little bit more time on it than I do the other ones that I make. When I do it in an assembly line on the rest of them, I'm going to go by a little bit quicker. I did add a little bit of pink down the spine just a minute ago. You could have seen it. I did it at a real kind of a glaze just to get a little bit shinier down on the ridges of his spine area. And there I am kind of highlighting the tongue and tentacles out of his mouth a little bit. Went over it all with abomination gore, and then just a little bit of highlights here and there with a mixture of the abomination gore and tentacle red. After that's all completed, what I did next was I went ahead and I started to highlight up the maw there to get it what I wanted. And then I used all these white. First I went with the pale skin, which is kind of an off-white, it isn't exactly white, and I went on all the teeth and painted them white. And then I used the abomination white, I think is what it's called, and just the tip of it as white. And so that got the very tips of it white. You'll also notice, if you can, I did put a little bit of black down on the bottom of the little maw part so that it would be very dark, like an empty gaping mouth, basically, that I was into a void of nothingness. And this is kind of the finished look that I got with it. I'm fairly happy with it. Looks all right to me. If you enjoy what I'm doing, you like my videos, make sure that you like, subscribe, and continue to support me.